All right. All right. Everybody hear me all right? And see the slideshow over here okay? Does it come up
Yes,
on your?
sir.
Okay, good deal. That's always good when that works out. All right. Well, we're starting Hinduism. If you, of all the religions I have studied, this is one of the religion that has so many strains in it that it just defies categories of any kind. And but it's got some very interesting things. And of course, a lot of people follow Hinduism, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But first, let's talk a little bit about some symbols of Hinduism. You can see over here is the uh, lettering for the word Om. And over here, the swastika, what is it usually associated with? A swastika.
Nazi Germany.
Nazi Germany, yeah. Well, the Hinduism owned it way before Nazi Germany came along. And the Nazis just appropriated that for their view. Now in Hinduism, it can go clockwise or counterclockwise. It really doesn't matter. And it'll have designs. Some of them, like this one here, has some designs. But it's just a sign of good fortune. We'll talk about that in a minute. And of course, everybody probably has heard of the sacred cow, right? The Hinduism and the sacred cow. But we'll talk about those here next. All right, so this one, Om. What's it usually associated with in your mind? Om.
Usually some kind of like somebody or like whatever someone's saying, whatever they're meditating or something
Right.
like that.
Meditation. Yeah, yoga, meditation. And that's what it's used. You make this deep Om, and it rattles your head and brain and stuff. And that deep Om sound is used to kind of help clear any attachments to the world as much as possible. Your swastika, and it has the idea of for good to prevail, which it's really kind of ironic when it's used with Nazi Germany. Now, it definitely was not good to prevail. But it has meaning well-being, prosperity, good fortune. And unfortunately, when you do see it today, it's usually not for that purpose. Now, if they happen to be Hindu and wear it, but I think most Hindus realize it got appropriated by Nazi Germany and it's associated with white supremacy today and things like that, which goes back to the Aryan being the great race of people, but still, it's where it originated. Then the sacred cow, which was honored by Krishna in the writings dealing with the god Krishna. And here you see a picture of a decorated cow, and you just don't bother cows when they're wandering around the streets of the city. They are to be treated with honor. So in the Indian scriptures, they note that a cow is a gift from the gods to the human race. It's a celestial being born sort of out of the churning of this cosmic ocean. Gias, as the cow is called in Hindi, is just a general symbolism of Earth itself and a fertile Earth for that matter. And so she's considered like the divine mother, that because she's known for giving her milk and sustaining people, that she's you know, she not only gives her milk, but her own offspring. So she's a symbol of care for human beings and the world in general. And also has become a symbol for taking care of the innocent, because cow is innocent and self-sacrificing. And this is a symbol for virtue for the Hindus. So it kind of identifies with their idea of dharma, or what dharma is, moral duty is one of the ways you can define it. Because the cow does its duty that helps everybody out. Uh, as a Hindu, they would say we do our duty as well, our moral duty, and we'll get into that more later on. Um, some of the ways that symbolizes the cow, you know, so many dairy products come from her. Besides the milk, she gets venerated as this celestial mother. And so she's gentle, kind, although I've known a few cows that weren't so gentle or kind, but, generally speaking, they're pretty docile. Killing a cow is, they really don't have the concept of sin like in Christianity so much, but it is, considered, wrong to mistreat or kill a cow. And there's even laws in India against this kind of thing. And some have even said this is equivalent to killing your own mother in some ways. So when you're driving in India, you may see cows just wandering around the streets in downtown big cities. People just let them go anywhere. They're considered that sacred. I'm Shah here. Shah here. Gentle nature or nonviolence is part of the symbolism. Compassionate nonviolence, and there are parts of Hinduism, a good many that really, would buy into this whole attitude of nonviolence. I think overall, most of the groups in Hinduism would be in the nonviolence section, although there are violence against other religions, and there's violence things going on between Islam and Hinduism even today. You got the goddess Kamadhenu, and she's this bovine type of cow-like goddess who's considered kind of the mother of all cows. And so she's the mother of well-being, good fortune, good luck, all those type of things come. So there's a lot of symbolism all around the sacred cow. And so when we run into various aspects of Hinduism, just keep in mind that symbolism will come back into things later as well. And you saw the picture of the one earlier that they decorate them on special occasions, particularly things having to do with good fortune. All right, so the Trinity, there's kind of a Trinity of Hinduism. So we're going to look at that for a moment. We're going to touch on some of the gods and goddesses for a minute, but then we're going to come back to them a little bit later and talk about them individually, at least some of the main ones. There is kind of a Trinity of that, not a, it should be, we talk about the Trinity, God is one, but he's three-person. Well, they call theirs a Trinity, but these are actually tritheism, because it's really three gods. And so don't confuse the concept of Trinity with this Trinity, as they call it here. This is Shiva and Vishnu, and the god of creation here, Brahma. And there's a video, if you want to watch it on your own, about Brahma, which would be interesting. But out of the three, the Shiva and Vishnu are highly worshipped in India. but Brahma is not, and it's a strange thing to me. And you know, the Brahma is the god of creation, created everything, and but all of a sudden, but he doesn't get venerated or worshipped very much, and so it's one of those things that once the job was done, just kind of faded out of popular use. But we'll talk about that more later. Then there's Ganesha, who's one real famous because of their the head, you know, is of an elephant. We'll talk about how that all came about. And then Kali, which is notorious for things, but it's got this necklace of skulls, and it's usually quite ugly looking thing. And we'll talk about Kali and that. I also gave you a video on Ganesha as well there. And then two extremely popular gods, Krishna and Rama. And now you got to remember that the gods and goddesses go through the cycle of reincarnation, just like all of humanity as Hindus view it. And they can come back in a different form. And they have their different avatars, which we'll talk about later. But these two are extremely popular, and you usually will find them being worshipped in most places. If you were to look at where most of Hinduism is, of course, it's going to occur right here in India and some adjacent countries. But I mean, 95% probably somewhere in there are located here. So, you know, you're basically born into a culture, and by birth, you're not only in that culture, but you're Hindu. They don't really separate the culture from their religion. Although there are people like Christians in India who, you know, have become believers, but they don't follow Hinduism anymore. And so they kind of get separated out and say, well, they're kind of have their own little caste of so-called Christians. But for the most part, everything, all of Hinduism, it pretty much is encapsulated here. All right, so there's 1.1 billion Hindus. I heard a newscast the other day that they think India is on track to be the third largest economy in the next 10, 20 years. And that's quite interesting. And but I'm not surprised at that. 14% of the world's population falls in this category. Yeah, so it's the third largest world religion, Christianity being number one, and Islam then. The secular non-religious are kind of tying with Hinduism. So you kind of see how it's placed in the world total population. The origins of Hinduism go way back, and it's, you know, it's hard to track exactly all the things that made up what later became Hinduism, but the idea is originally the Dravidians, Indian civilization, were the ones that inhabited the Indus Valley, as it was called. And this goes back to 2500 BC. So Abraham and before that time period. So these would be the indigenous people of India. And so they were tribal people. They got the name Dasas. They were described as dark-skinned, thick-lipped, possessing cattle, and speaking a strange language. That language has never been deciphered, So I'm sure there's scholars working on it. Um, there was an more advanced, as they called it, civilization from Harappa to Mohenjo-daro. These were planned cities. They even had sewage systems that were even connected to the houses. And we know of other civilizations like this of that time period in the Middle East as well. Uh, the but again, they haven't deciphered the language. Um, for the most part, the religious activities are not known. They've found some figurines and sculptures of people meditating. So the meditations seem to be a part of it, or it could have been praying. They don't really know. But it looks like they had fertility gods and goddesses from that time period. Um, there would be later coming into these indigenous people would be the Indo-Aryans or Indo-Europeans. They began to immigrate from Eastern Europe into India from 1800 to 1500 BC. And their language is the source of Greek, Latin, Celt, German, Slav languages come from them. And but you would have their influence coming to India as well. And they would bring these oral traditions with them called the Vedas. And this is important because the Vedas are going to be the name for the earliest scriptures related to Hinduism. But you might note that it's probably not so much from the indigenous people that it comes from. Maybe some of it got mixed together, but we have so little information on that it's not very clear. They did have a rishi, a seer, which we talked about this earlier in African traditional religion. We talked about Meru people had a prophet among them. Well, they had a seer among them who drank what we talked about this in an earlier presentation with Zoroastrianism, soma. This is your hallucinogenic drink that they used to get a high so they could experience God. And they would write down hymns and other things that would become these sacred writings, the Vedas. And but the Vedas are a very diverse collection of stuff. And so we, diving into this Sanskrit and things like that, scholars have, tried to see some organization, but really they're kind of all over the place. But we'll see some way to understand these writings a little bit later on. So here you have a map of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa here, and how they immigrated down into the northern part and central part of India. So in the southern part, you have a lot more people related to the indigenous people, even till today. All right, so the Indo-Aryans, they came and they became agriculturalists while they were there. They had a ruler called the Raj, which in Latin Rex, if you know any of the Latin, they had a private army and their own priests. And so they would come up and send up, kind of principalities in that world. The priests would supersede simple rituals, and they would eventually be the only source. If you wanted to sacrifice to the gods, the priests were the ones that you had to consult, and so they became the controllers of the beliefs, and that would have probably been a lot different than what the indigenous people did. It'd probably been more like what we saw with Native American or African traditional. But these priests became known as Brahmins. Now, there's going to be a lot of Brahma stuff. Brahma, the god, Brahmins, Brahmana, Brahmans. So you're going to have to keep these Brahmins straight, and I'll give you a slide later to help you do that. You got what's called the Brahmanas, or the books of the Brahmins, in other words, it's called. And so don't get these Brahmin things. So in those books, they record the sacrifices and information about their powers. It was closer to like magical stuff, that type of stuff that was in them, that's in them. So we're going to break the recording off here in a minute with this this slide, and then we'll pick up on the next. The term Hindu is actually not from the people themselves. That was not their descriptive, but that's the one that is stuck. And it actually had its origins among the Muslims who conquered that area. And they used it to describe the northern Indian people there, which would have been a mix of the indigenous and the Indo-European. Then when the British took over and colonized India, the term Hinduism was used to describe all the diverse religion that was present in India and still is to this day. So today, that's the word that's still around. It's used to popularly describe the religious life, and say, okay, you got Christianity here, Islam here, Hinduism here, and so you know. But when we talk about Hinduism, it's not like Christianity and Islam, which have a well-defined theology, very specific. There really is no unified religious entity in Hinduism, and so it's best to talk about Hinduism as Hindu traditions, various traditions and beliefs and practices, and we'll talk about that in a moment. All right, well, I'm going to turn off the recording here, and we'll pick up here in a moment.